There's a couple posters on some of the beaches I left. It's funny in retrospect. I remember getting beaten up on
It's all your fault.
Halloween. You know, these cops said, "Come over here." I go over there. It's right near DS Park, and I go in there and I'm like, "Yeah, what do you want?" Got like 10 shots to the ribs. I'm like, what the hell? And they threw me back on the DP. And I just like, you know, it's Halloween, so I was just like, did that just happen? Just kept cruising down the street.
What was your costume?
I don't remember that year, but I do I do remember one particular year I dressed like this. And I totally forget about that all the time, but I remembered at one point I was like looking in the mirror and I said, this looks so familiar. And I remember that I dressed as a Hasidic rabbi on whatever it's called, Purim or Halloween. So yeah, so I dressed as this Hasidic rabbi and I found a priest, which is amazing. So him and I cruised down DP together like the whole time. We were just like arm in arm and like blessing everybody. And we had a pregnant nun with us as well, I think. Yeah, we had a pregnant nun. Yeah, on my left, I think, was a pregnant nun. And we were kind of like we were like religion, you know. But it was really amazing because you know when you wear that costume after enough hours you start becoming it. And I think it must have had some crazy impact on me, you know. I don't know.
I can tell.
What?
I can see that.
Yeah, I think this is all like just coming from that random costume in Halloween. Yeah. So anyway, I lived in first year I lived in San Miguel dorms. You heard of those dorms, San Miguel? And our hall was third floor. It was like the most random hall ever, and people were like really quite straight. But I had already been coming to UCSB since I was in my third year of high school because I ran away from home when I was just turned 17 and I moved into UCSB, into FT dorms at 17 years old, 2 years before even graduating high school. I was living in FT. Yeah, and again, that's even 2 years before the police state of Santa Barbara. I was just crashing out in people's rooms and stuff, yeah. And anyway, those were crazy times, for sure. No, I'm from LA, so West LA. So I lived in FT like for a little while, and then eventually I went back to high school and stuff. And so when I came into the dorms, I thought everyone was gonna be like totally chill and like just like the people I met in FT and everything. And instead, I had like computer scientists and all these like different types of people in that hall. Well, after a couple weeks of knowing me, they were introduced to a whole new world of Santa Barbara. Meaning, I'm the one who took my entire hall to Isla Vista the very first Thursday night, you know, and they were just like people were, and they literally, I think everyone in the dorm hall threw up that night. And I was just like, "What's wrong with you people? You know, there's a new party right down DP. We're going." And they're just like, "Ah." Call an ambulance. You just can't believe these were the same people at the end of the year that started like that, because at the end of the year they were such veterans. And anyway, so at the last 2 months of the year, they had realized that this particular dorm hall, which was the most random hall, had the most write-ups of any dorm hall in the entire university campus by double. It had the most write-ups. And they couldn't figure out what in the world was going on with this one hall, so they actually set up an investigation to see what's going on in the hall. And so all they were trying to do is get to the nucleus of it. You know, like what in the world's going on here before they burn the building down. So,
Where did all the rebellion come from?
What rebellion?
That whole like running away at 17.
Where in LA are you from?
Oh, that.
Yeah.
That was just a misunderstanding.
Where in LA are you from?
What?
Where in LA are you from?
I'm from Brentwood. Yeah, Barrington. I grew up in Barrington. Anyway, Dustin Hoffman actually lives in my parents'
Where did you go
home.
to high school?
I went to Pally and Crossroads. End of the year, so what happened was they realized there's one person in the dorm hall that had never been called in for anything and has 0 write-ups. And so they figured he's either the biggest nerd on the hall or he's the one who's behind all of this. And next thing I know, I'm in a full-on campus court case. And it's like there are witnesses, there's evidence, there's like everything except nothing can be linked to me. And they finished the whole court case. They said, you've been found not guilty, but you are immediately, your lease or whatever, your room has been terminated. And we can't get you on anything, but we know you're behind all this. And so you're off campus. Now, just to go back a little bit, I never wanted to go to university because I was, at 11 years old, I kind of dropped out of society. I was 11 years old. I was staring at the stars in the hills, in the foothills of LA with my oldest brother. He was 16, so now he had wheels, and we were best friends. It's my brother Sam. And we're staring at the stars, and he's telling me about I'm only 11, so he's like explaining the distance between the stars and the amount of space and how much time it takes for the starlight to even get to us, and how big the universe is. I mean, if you just go out like a couple planets, like out towards Saturn, you try to look back at the Earth on like a chart, so you wouldn't even see the Earth. It would just put a little arrow saying this is where the Earth would be if you could see it. And that's only our Milky Way. Sorry, that's only our galaxy that's within our Milky Way.
No, that's only the star system.
No, I'm saying it starts in our star. That's called our Milky.
Star system is the star system, and then the galaxy is Milky Way.
Right, but our star system is called I just said it.
There's no name.
Solar system. We call it the solar system because the sun's the root of it. Yeah, that's our solar system, which is part of our galaxy, which is one of, like, God knows, countless galaxies. Anyway, you know that feeling, yeah? You guys have looked at the stars and had that feeling of small, like what's the point of it all? What am I doing here? I'm a speck of dust flying around in a speck of dust. You ever had that feeling, Evan?
No.
Well, it's time you did. Okay? Your life is very random here, unless it's not. But it can only be one or the other. You're either filled with purpose, or you're just an advanced piece of algae. Okay? One or the other.
I believe in the second one.
That you're an advanced piece of algae?
No. The purpose.
First one, you mean you have an awesome purpose. Awesome purpose. And so, but that feeling of looking at those stars, raise your hand if you had that feeling, just so I don't have to ask everybody. Yeah, that feeling of looking at those stars is a catalyst that's supposed to happen in your heart, where not that you get it, it's that you get it, that you got to start asking some serious questions now. That's what you get. You get that now it's about the questions. Because I got to figure this thing out. Because years are going, man. Time's clicking. If you're here for some awesome, greater thing, well, you better find out what that is and start aligning your life and your decisions with that thing. And if you want to live an awesome life, get the answers and start doing it. Yeah? You'll have an awesome life. You'll be energized and full of power and inspiration. So, but you're supposed to have these thoughts when you're like, I don't know, you're like in college or something, I don't know. Josh, when was the first time you had that feeling?
I don't know, like sophomore year in high school.
Yeah, when did you have that feeling?
When I was really little.
Oh, so you had it like me?
Yeah.
Yeah, when did you have it? You
Middle school.
Middle school. What about you, Radio?
Well, like fifth grade.
What?
Like in elementary school.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, so you're a young one too. Yeah. So what happened was I came down from the hills with my brother. I was sitting in my bed, thinking about it. And I'm like, I'm a speck of dust, flying on a flying speck of dust. What is my life for? But the thing is I had to answer that question. I think growing up in like such a fancy part of town with the mansion world and such affluence and comfort, yet purposelessness, like lack of purpose, meaninglessness, and a lot of unhappiness. Not that people were unhappy. I mean, people were happy, but I guess meaninglessness. That was the main thing. And so I had to find out what it was about and what my life's about. I was graduating high school, and my father wanted me to go to university, and I refused to go to university because, I really wanted to find the truth, so I completely ignored academia. I had no prerequisites. I had no anything really. There was no way to get into university. I had a 2.0 grade point average. Is that C's?
Yeah.
I had a 2.0 grade point average, and that wasn't because I studied. That was because if you're Jewish, you're going to get a C, on a multiple guess exam or an essay or something. And so I had a 2.0 grade point average. Had none of the prerequisites necessary for Santa Barbara. And my dad just was like, you got to go to university. So I said, I'm not going. It was a whole fight. And in the end, he bribed me to go to UCSB. And if you're wondering how I got in, my dad knew the mayor of Los Angeles. And the mayor of Los Angeles, like the mayor of LA knows, the UC Regents and everything. And next thing I knew, I was in. Like, immediate acceptance into the dorms and into the campus. And so I showed up here after 11 years, not 11 years, let's see, I was 18 from 11 years old. I was 7 years out of school. I showed up to UCSB 7 years out of school. And what? I'd mentioned before I'd kind of dropped out at around 11. So.
You didn't get a degree?
High school, I did.
Oh, you just like.
So, yeah, so I took every quarter, I took 2 classes for grades and 1 class pass, no pass, but I didn't go to that one. And they still have pass, no pass? They still have pass, no pass. So I took that class, pass, no pass, and I was just here to surf. And my dad said, this was the bribe. I get a Toyota 4Runner, 6 kegs a week delivered to my door every Thursday. Obviously, all expenses paid for and everything, and also during my breaks, I get to surf internationally during those breaks because I was already surfing internationally, and I wanted to, just at my breaks, I can go to exotic places and stuff. And but the grand finale was when I graduate UCSB, I get to go on a world tour with just country by country by country. And I don't have to come back. I get to stay and just keep traveling. And so,
Question.
Yeah.
So, in this phase of your life, what was the relationship between your material pleasures and your search for truth?
Probably 10% material and 90% search for truth.
So even though 10% of your life was ruled by the material pleasures, these 6 kegs a week and unlimited surfing was enough of an incentive to get you to do these other things. Well,
I wasn't really on campus. I didn't go much to class. I would go on exam days, and I specifically took pass no pass classes. Multiple guess exam classes where you wouldn't have to write an essay or anything like that. And so that's how I took my classes. By the way, I'm not here to influence any of you in how to do college, but I really refused to go, and my father said to me, I don't care if you go or not, just get me the diploma. I handed it to him, by the way, 5 years later, and he says, you deserve this more. I said to him, you deserve this more than me. And they called me in on my 5th year to the registrar. I'm like, hello, Mr. Glaser. I'm like, what's going on in here? What's up? Everything's cool, no? And they're like, we just thought you might want to choose a major. And I'm like, didn't I choose a major my 3rd year? And they're like, yeah, maybe you'd like to tell us what that was. I was stumped. I had no idea what major I chose in my 3rd year. And they were just like, Mr. Glaser, you cannot stay here forever. And I'm like, why not? And we're paying, yeah. And they're like, you must choose a major. I said, okay, give me a list. And they're like, no, there's only one major you can finish by June. And I said, what's that? And I said, geography. I'm like, geography? What do I do with geography? And they're like, well, there is an emphasis in wave prediction. And I said, really? I said, okay, I'll be geography. And I actually wrote my thesis paper for my graduation on, ready for this? You want to talk about like Southern California selfish, surfer bum. Listen to this. The paper was the effects of ice cap melt, global warming, where the seas get more volume of waters, effect on surf spots in Santa Barbara. Meanwhile, LA's underwater and 30 million people just died, and I'm writing a paper on like what the surf's gonna be like. So what I did was I just mapped out these mountains here and how the ridges come down, and I mapped out what the surf spots would be like at the base of the mountains of Goleta. Yeah, that was my thesis. And the professor went crazy over it. He loved it. I got an A. The only A I got in my entire school was this paper. He thought it was so out of the box. Yeah. Anyway, by the way, at one point I was the chairman of Hilo because I really needed a bathroom badly. And I was walking down the street, and I was like literally bursting. I was like, so I said, I'm just going to this place, I'm just gonna knock on the door. Ask me to use the bathroom. Open up the door, it was Hilo, right before they're gonna make Kiddush. And I'm just like, look at this guy, and no one wears kippahs. I didn't know he's Jewish. I'm like, can I use the bathroom? And he's like, yeah, I guess so. Come on in. And as I go in, he's like, are you Jewish by any chance? And I'm like, yeah. He says, do you know where you are right now? I said, no. He says, this is the Hilo House. And I'm like, wow. I'd been in university for so long already. I never knew there was a Hilo House. So I'm like, wow, that's amazing. He says, so why don't you come for Kiddush after you use the bathroom? So I came to the Kiddush. The next day, I get a phone call from the rabbi saying, we want to make you the chairman of Hilla. And I became the chairman of the Hilla of UCSB. I didn't know Hebrew, I didn't know anything, I knew nothing about Israel. And they had to take it away from me later because the Gulf War broke out. And so the press was coming to me for like my comment on like all the things going on in Israel during the Gulf War. The Scud missiles are flying into Israel. The U.S. is protecting their Patriot missiles and stuff. And they wanted a word from me. The problem was I had long hair down like mid-back with an amethyst bead, tie-dye, tank top. And I've been covering myself in like fake blood, like laying out in the middle of campus doing war protests. Completely oblivious to the fact that I was the chairman of Hilla. So they called me up and they said, listen, just under the circumstances, we're gonna have someone else be the chairman of Hilla from now on. And so I was no longer the chairman of Hilla, but I was the chairman of Hilla for quite some time. Yeah. They figured it would bring more people into Hilla. Anyway, when I was ejected from the dorms, I moved into my truck on DP. I parked it actually in the end. Is this where 67 block begins?
66.
Is 66? So one block over is 67 block. The corner house on Mountainside was a party house beyond belief. In fact, I'm not even going to say the words as a rabbi of what the house was called, but there's a park named after it. It begins with the word dog. Yeah? So the name of this house was the second word in the word house. So the S house. Yeah, that's what it was called. But all over campus, this was what it was called. The S house. And so what I did was, those were my buddies, so I just parked my 4Runner right under the apartment there. And I slept in the back of my truck for the last 2 months of freshman year. And just, that's where I slept, but I hung out in a place. Turned out they all graduated, so I just moved my friends and I all into that particular apartment. And we threw these major parties. We never met the landlord. Landlord was some kid from like Santa Barbara, was like some rich kid. We never met the guy. We were never on a lease, ever. And in our second year in this apartment, halfway through the second year, we all wake up at like noon. And, we wouldn't clean up from parties. We'd only clean up the cups and anything that's like taller than that. We had a LA Times subscription. And at the end of every party, we would cover the party with a layer of the LA Times. And so when you walked in the house, like by the second year, it was already like a step this big to get into the house. And so we lived on this layer of newspaper. And it was insane, you know. And so in the second year, this guy shows up. He tells us he's the landlord. He wakes us all up. He says, everyone gather in this one room. We all sit in the room. He's in a chair. We're all sitting on the edge of these beds. And he's like, I'm the landlord. And we're just like, huh? And he's like, I don't know who you people are. There's no lease here. And I haven't seen a penny for this place in about 2 years. He goes down a list of the tenants. He had old papers, and he's like, are you guys these people? And we're like, no. He says, I'm going to be back here next week. You better cough up some serious dough. So we left the place. We threw one more major party. And that was it. We moved down to the 65 block, Oceanside DP. And
Which house?
I don't remember, but the show went on from there. It was amazing. We kept it up over there in that place, and but then we had to then we were signed on. We had to be responsible. But it was amazing because the amount of beer you can buy, because those kegs ran out, and you had all your rent money for beer. You can understand that's a good position to be in. Yeah. My father's business, he had an international sportswear business, went bankrupt. He loses everything. My parents lose all their money. And here I'm in my last year of university, and I'm having to drive down to LA and help them move out of their mansion. And a week away from graduation, I call my dad and I'm like, I gotta book this flight, I'm getting the diploma. I gotta book my round the world flight. And my dad's like, there's no round the world flight. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, I can't do it. Split screen. My brother Sam was in Jerusalem 7 years prior at a place called Torah. He was there a little while, came back to LA, never really told us much of what happened over there. We didn't even know where he was. Didn't say a word to me. 7 years, he didn't say a word.
You went back?
He calls up Torah. He says, you remember me? Sam Glaser, I was there 7 years ago. And they're like, kinda. And he says, listen, I need you to get my brother a scholarship to come study in Israel. And they're like, well, is he scholarly? Because we do have a trip, but it's all Ivy League students. 15 Ivy League boys and 15 Ivy League girls. And they're like, is he a scholar? And my brother's like, not really, but you got to do it for me. Anyway, so they said, what about an essay and an application? He says, oh, just send it to me. And he filled out the essay and the application. Didn't tell me a word. I was accepted, and he calls me in Santa Barbara, and he says, how would you like a free trip to Europe? Because I had surfed France, Spain, Portugal the previous year. And he says, how would you like a free trip to Europe? Then you can bump off into Morocco and then South Africa. I've got to surf all these places, by the way, subsequently as a rabbi. I try to book my classes where there's good waves. And anyway, so I said to my brother, I said, yeah, okay, I'll take that ticket. And what's the catch? He says, you just have to go to Jerusalem for 6 weeks. And I'm like, Israel's not on the way to Europe. And he was like, take it or leave it. So I showed up with this group of people in Jerusalem. And it was they thought a Martian dropped in there. They didn't know what to do with me. It was a crazy situation. And I had a backlog of 12 years of questions since I was 11 years old. 12 years, since that starry night. 12 years. Not one religion. Believe me, I met a lot of religious types of people around the world surfing. Every single time I ever spoke to a religious man, he always told me that I had to suspend logic. I had to suspend, this is higher than the mind. And I'm like, why would God give me a brain if I'm not supposed to use it? And why would I have to suspend logic to get in touch with God? And so that was it. I just I could never be part of anything religious. Not to mention, in my travels, I saw a lot of the bloodbath that religions have meant, and that religion basically just, to me, meant power and blood. And I felt organized religions were like evil. And I felt also about God was that if you can't prove it, then why would I believe in it? Right? Why believe in something you can't prove? And so that was out because I thought you can't prove God's existence at the time. So I came in with my 12-year backlog of questions, and I met these like white bearded rabbis who had like really long beards and really beautiful faces and like kind of lit up, like people were really alive. And shockingly, they were actually interested in me and my questions. And their answers were like, I mean, you would have thought they'd have to look up these answers, but they were like right off the cuff. They'd give like this iceberg answer. Iceberg meaning they probably could have answered it, like the tip of an iceberg, but they gave me the full, mountain. And what happened was my 12 years of questions started having babies. You ask one question, all of a sudden you had like, by the time you finished that question, I'd written down like 10 new questions. And I realized at the end of, like within the first week, that I was going to be there a really long time. Because I got to get the answers to all my questions. And my 6 weeks expanded into, at this point, 23 years. Thank God. I'm married with 8 kids. And I run a seminar company internationally, and I play music professionally, and I teach Torah all around the world and bring inspiration to my fellow Jews. And in Jerusalem, where you got to be part of that experience, I teach every day a class that's kind of a journey in itself. We never knew where we were going or what we were getting ourselves into, but we got to some amazing places. Yeah. So I'm really going to teach you a little something, but just thought I'd fill you in a little background of my journey. That's more or less the journey.
Did you get all your answers questions?
What?
All your questions answered?
Did I get all my questions answered? Yeah. I did actually. I kind of discovered something interesting because you'd think like, if you got all your answers, no, I'm saying, if you got all your questions answered, so what's worth living for anymore, right? But but I learned something. There's 2 levels to the search. There's searching for what's real, and now if you find what's real, that's probably going to be a fairly complex subject in its own. So now your search it goes inward. You get what I mean? I mean, if you were searching for like, I don't know, the ultimate way to transmit voice, over phones, the ultimate way. So, and you figure out that sound waves, or radio waves, the way to do it. But now your work starts. Now you got to really get to work and get cracking, and you'll have to get grants, and you'll have to get investors, and you'll have to search and search and search till you just finally discover cell phones. And are able to produce them and make them affordable and stuff. So it's the same thing as search for meaning of life is, the way U2 puts it is, and I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And a lot of us look at the search like, you just keep searching, but you never really find out. You never really get the answers. So you kind of put the search on the front burner, back burner, front burner, back burner, But there's actually, if you search your way into Judaism, the search then begins. It begins in the wisdom of Judaism. And then you search. You need a serious search engine for Judaism. You gotta, it's really something.
I guess you shouldn't be afraid to ask the tough questions.
That's another important thing, yeah. It's not being able to, afraid to ask the tough questions, no matter who you're speaking to. But if, let's say you, for example, so imagine we're all on a trip to Israel with Rabbi Hamfling, and we're over there, and Josh, we're in Sfat. You guys heard of Sfat, the mystical city of Sfat? It's where all the Kabbalah is and all that. Like everyone studies Kabbalah there. So we're in the mystical city of Sfat, and we can't find Josh. Like, where's Josh? Where's Josh? So we finally find Josh, like sitting with these Kabbalistic dudes, and he's like, and his eyes are like, and we're like, Josh, man, where you been? What's going on? So he says, I'm not leaving Sfat until I truly understand the secrets of the universe. And we're like, dude, wake up, man. We gotta go. And he's like, not going. Beard. So we start like through the door, across the hall, you know, all the way into his study. And there's like, but we see coming out of the door, like, it's like light, like coming out of the door, you know, and we open up the door and we're all like, and we keep following the beard across the floor. And then it finally goes up on this table and across this ancient text. And then it just focuses right in on Josh's eyes. And we can recognize his eyes from back in the day. And he puts down his book, covers his book, and he looks up at us and he says, it's a battlefield. And we're just like, what? Josh, after all this time studying the Torah and the Kabbalah, you know, like, what's the answer? Who is God? And Josh says to us, I have no idea. And we're like, what are you doing here? And he's like, it is so awesome. And then, of course, we'd meet his 15 kids and his holy wife, whose eyes are also shining like the stars. Like the stars he saw in the first place when he was a sophomore in school. So you need a serious search engine for the Torah. Now, we can all know Torah peripherally. I don't know what an appetite you have, like how much Torah you want to know, you know? I know how much Torah Albert wants to know.
Enough to support Zionism in the state? I don't know.
A lot more.
Like I said, you shouldn't be afraid to ask the tough questions.
Yeah. You need a lot, you not that you need to, you want to.
To me, I read many stories. For example, there are many concepts that apparently contradict themselves, but later on, they don't contradict themselves. And the contradictions I had are now much less, but they're still there. So I want to make sure the contradictions are addressed.
But let's say they were addressed.
I don't.
Then what?
There's always contradictions.
All addressed. Then what? Say they theoretically, Albert.
Theoretically,
They all got addressed, and now you're like, okay, they're all addressed. Now where are you going? How much wisdom you want?
It's an unending amount of wisdom. You'll never end this journey.
How much do you want?
Enough to find purpose in my life. It's a hard question.
That's not very much.
I think it's a lot. It all depends on the purpose.
I know people who know, like, not a lot of Torah, you know, kind of kiddie pool Torah, and they're filled with purpose. If you know even a little Torah, you're going to be like, you'll be like, your blood is going to, like, be like turbocharged.
Oh, I mean, for example.
Even like, has he been on a trip yet to Israel?
Yeah.
You go on a trip to Israel, just how many weeks what is it, 2 weeks or something? You'll be on a 2-week trip. You'll have more information and contradictions resolved that you'll just be like, oh, wow. I never have to open another book.
That's impossible.
It depends on your appetite. That's why I'm focusing
On the appetite.
on your appetite.
A lot.
I'm not saying you have to have a lot. Mine's not very big. I just want to know what's real. If found out what's real. Now I surf, mountain bike, and hang out with people and play music. How big's your appetite? You wouldn't be in Santa Barbara if you had a big appetite. His appetite's probably similar to mine. People we know people who think we're crazy for being here, hanging out here. Right? We know a lot of people. They think we have like flown the coop. We're out of our minds. Because we know what Torah is, but we don't know it like they do, who swim in its wisdom. They're swimming in the wisdom. They're just like, once you get plugged into that, you don't want anything else. I have a 17-year-old son.
Should they know balance though?
What?
Should they understand moderation and balance?
Well, every person has their own balance. Some of these guys belong to gyms and are athletes. Some are artists, some are musicians. Got to make a living, feed your kids. So.
Well, some people don't think that.
What?
Some people don't think that.
Their wives do. Yeah, I mean, you still got to pay for everything. This is one of talk about icebergs. You know what the iceberg commandment is in the Torah? Be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply is the iceberg commandment. Looks like a cute commandment. Looks like fun. Yeah. You know why God made that the first commandment of the whole Bible? Is be fruitful and multiply? Because he figured when you read that one, you'd keep reading. But think what an iceberg commandment that is. A spiritual discipline, the last thing it should instruct you is to have a bunch of kids. Because if you have a bunch of kids, you are going to have to feed them. And if you got to feed them, you got to be involved in all kinds of things that are not saying Om at the top of a Himalayan mountain. Yeah? Because you don't get paid for saying Om. You got to feed those little guys. Yeah? And the Torah commands it because the Torah wants a Jew interfaced with this world. The Torah doesn't want you out in outer space. You should go out of outer space. In the morning, put on your tefillin, go to outer space. Take them off, study some Torah, and go to work. That's what most people do. And of course, I was mentioning guys that we know who are swimming in the deep sea of Torah. And so they have to figure out how they make their living. But they live simply, very simply. Yeah. So, Albert, give me one of your contradictions. Let's put it on the table.
Well, for example, it says in the Torah Jews care for one another, but, well, Rabbi Naftali kind of addressed it, but
Yeah, go
for
on.
example, Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers who were Jewish, so why should Jews care about one another? That's one of the morals, of the story. And
Okay.
King David also, well, related to that, King David, he ordered the murder of his rivals who were Jewish too.
Right.
And he had no problem raiding Jewish settlements with the Philistines, so at a certain point.
That probably, the last part probably needs a little more clarity in its details, but yeah, so let me tell you something beautiful, Albert, and that is that unlike all other traditions that make the ancestors look really righteous, the Torah chooses to expose the ancestors. We're going to hear the mistakes Abraham made. We're going to hear about Isaac's mistakes and Jacob's mistakes. We're going to hear about Moses' mistakes. We're going to hear about brothers treating one of their brothers with treachery, and we're going to understand why they did it. There was a reason why they did it.
Jealousy.
The Torah says they were jealous, but there were some more details you have to know about. Yeah. So, and by the way, that doesn't make it right. They blew it so badly. It's considered one of the worst things in the history of the Jewish people. But it teaches you a little something and me a little something. I got 3 brothers. You got brothers?
No.
Your sisters?
A little sister.
Okay, it's a little easier with one little sister. But it teaches siblings a little bit about little lessons in how to be siblings. You see, the reason why the Torah magnifies the mistakes of the people in the stories, whereas every other religion turns everyone into a saint in their books. Our Torah makes it specifically focuses on their mistakes. Torah didn't have to tell you that. There's all kinds of missing parts of the Torah. Who needs to know Jacob's sons at that point? Let the story start later, when Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. It's in there because you need to know this. we need to know, because one of the most important lessons of that kidnapping of their brother and sending him down to Egypt and stuff, the most important lessons of that was how they owned it later. See, Joseph only revealed himself to them when he saw they owned it, because they didn't know he spoke Hebrew. He's the Prince of Egypt, speaking Egyptian to everybody. They didn't know it was their brother. They hadn't seen him in a long time. He left as a kid, and now he's a full bearded Egyptian king. It's just the context was so out of this world, they never realized it was his brother. So they're all speaking amongst themselves. Why is this happening to us? Because Joseph the prince was putting them through hell. And he was listening in their Hebrew. And only when he saw that they finally owned it, and isn't that an important lesson in life, to own it? When they finally owned it and said, this is happening to us because of what we did to our brother. And immediately Joseph turns to them in tears and he says, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. Od Avichai. Od Avi, is my father still alive? They just told him he's still alive. Why is he asking, is my father still alive? And the answer is that I see you owned it about me. But what about Dad? What do you think it was like for Dad? All those years I was missing. Is he still alive? Is there anything left of him after 22 years of thinking that I was dead? But you brought up a first contradiction, Albert, and that is the contradiction of the fact that we're supposed to treat each other nicely. You just used one quote from the Torah, so I focused on that. We're supposed to treat each other nicely, yet you will see, if you look at a little news, Jews are not always treating each other nicely. So I'd like to teach you, all of you, an amazing lesson, and that is never judge Judaism by the Jews. Okay? Never judge Judaism by the Jews. You've got to get off of it, because we always do that. We judge Hollywood by the actors' behavior. Yeah, we judge, politicians and politics. We judge politics based on politicians' behavior. So you think Judaism, so check out the Jews and that's Judaism, and judge Judaism based on the Jews. No way. Let me tell you something about Torah. Torah is the benchmark. And this sukkah up above us, yeah? That's about, the Jew who's stretching the most in our generation, like the holiest of all Jews of this generation, his fingers would be about here. And that would be keeping Torah totally, like totally being interfaced with Torah. Torah is not about ever knowing it, because you'll never know it. And it's not about ever even keeping it, because you'll never get there all the way. In fact, the rabbi who wrote the most exacting compendium of the laws of Shabbat, his name was the Chafetz Chaim, and he said that you could study all of my book and know every law of Shabbat, and I promise you'll be breaking it if you don't review it yearly. You'll be breaking Shabbat if you don't review it yearly. Meaning you got it, now you got it, and now you have a law in his intro to the book. Now you have it. Now you can really keep Shabbat in its laws. He says, if you don't review it yearly, I promise you'll be breaking Shabbat this year.
So what's the value of keeping any of it then?
Because Torah is the benchmark, man. It's the bar. Our job in this world is to stretch. So I'm always studying the laws of Shabbat. Always. And which is beautiful, because I'm always in study. Yeah? Torah is the benchmark, and my job is to stretch. Now, I don't want to mention the denominations I was raised in, but they took that bar and they just put it right down to our current behavior. And, oh, that's what you're all doing? Okay, we'll put the bar there. That's Judaism. Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Don't forget to register for your membership this year. It'll only be, I wouldn't know, probably $20,000, $30,000 or something. Who knows what these memberships can cost in some of these richer areas? Yeah. Put the bar at our current behavior. I mean, is that not morality today, guys? And what is wrong and right? What's the real value system in America? The answer is, look at current behavior, and that's the current value system. You see, human beings can't live with themselves if they're not being good. So what's the shortcut to feeling good with about yourself? Put what good is at where you're at now. That's what's good. The good is where we're at now. And so public opinion changes based on our behavior. I'll give you an example in a little story. There was once a king walking through the forest. And he's with all his men. They all got their bows and arrows, and they're training. And they start to notice that there's targets with arrows exactly in the bullseye. And they keep going through the forest, and they're finding more of them, more of them, more of them. What's going on here? So the king says to his men, search the forest, find me this archer. And so they search the forest, and they find the archer. And they bring him to the king. And there he is with his bow and arrow and his bucket of paint and paintbrush. And the king says to him, I've never seen anyone like you. What's your secret? You're going to train my men. And he says, it's very simple. I pull back the arrow. I aim it at that tree. I release the arrow. And then I take my paintbrush and I paint a target around it. That's Western morality. First, shoot the arrow wherever you feel like shooting it, and then paint a target around it and say that's what's right and wrong. Not the Jews. We have a criteria, an endless criteria, and you see it never ages. It's always timeless. And you can take any situation you're in or the public's in, any argument, whether it's abortion, euthanasia, you name it. You take any issue and you take the transparency of Torah and you use it as an overlay over that issue. You'll know exactly what to do. And it will create longevity to your life and your existence, your lifestyle. So you can't judge Judaism by the Jews because it's a benchmark. We're not there. Yes, we got to treat each other differently. So I must stretch. And when I see a Jew who's from some group that really judges me, I love his group, but he judges me. I see that Jew, and I know he judges me. And I've even heard he judges me. I've heard him even say things about my group. I have to love that guy. I got to stretch. I got to stretch towards the benchmark of loving all people. And there's another issue. The Torah was given 3,326 years ago in a few months. You want to judge Judaism by the Jews? You know, imagine a horse race where the horses are running around a track. Only instead of like, let's say, what's the biggest amount? Maybe 3 times around the track? Probably the biggest race 4 times around the track. They don't go so, because it's not good for the horses. Imagine they have to run around the track 3,326 times around the track. And now they're on the finish line. How are those horses going to look over there? How are the jockeys going to look? They're going to be like blue. You know, they're like hanging off the side of their horse, just like, yeah. How are the horses going to look at the end of it all? So all the more so we can't judge Judaism by the Jews. You get that? Like, oh my gosh. How are we possibly going to be anywhere near that benchmark? But I'll tell you one thing, guys, just as a lesson, and I just taught many lessons, but the main lesson for us is leave Torah where it's at and start stretching. This is one of the beauties in Israel. Israel only has one denomination. It's called Torah. So you should be what you call a post-denominational Jew. If anyone asks you what kind of Jew are you, just say, post-denominational. And they'll be like, what is post-denominational? And you just say, well, I just consider the Torah the benchmark, and I'm striving wherever I'm striving. Striving. Yeah, you like that? It's cool, right? Yeah. Post-denominational. You know, I get that sometimes, you know, I'm being hired for some town to come to a concert or whatever, and they'll be like, so Rabbi, you know, what denomination are you? So from now on, I'll say I'm post-denominational. Rabbis without borders.
I'm gonna use. That's a good one.
Anyone else have a question, or we'll hit another conflict maybe from Albert? He's our conflict dude.
What do you teach at age?
I'll just one more, just take it a bit deeper, is you have to be careful, Albert, and everybody, not to let your conflicts be excuses. You know what I'm talking about. So that's really important. Don't let your conflicts be your excuse why you're not diving into the sea.
Say this, don't let your questions become your answers.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, questions are supposed to be answered. You know?
Then how are we ever good enough? Is the question. Like you're saying, it towards the benchmark, and we're always like stretching to be like where it is. If we always do that, we don't like value ourselves now. Like if we're never.
You have to be a little careful with self-esteem these days in Judaism. In the old days, it was fine.
Yeah, you're okay to be a piece.
Yeah, no. In the old days, where people had a lot of self-esteem, I don't know if you know. I mean, you might be able to study it a bit here in the University in Sociology, but since the Industrial Revolution, there's a lot of scholarly work on this. There's been as technology has gone up since the Industrial Revolution, self-esteem's been on a steep slope down. So you're asking a really awesome question, Herschel, because
You get into a contradiction.
in our generation, man, if you're never reaching the benchmark, how are you supposed to look at yourself in the mirror?
Yeah.
Here's one answer. I already said it. Because once you get clear with the fact that your job's to strive, you're striving. One day you're going to strive more than another. You have hot days, you have cold days. You're not always on fire for God. Not always on fire for discovering wisdom. I myself go in major phases throughout the year. There's times I'm hitting the books, there's times I can't look at them. The main thing is, that particular day, I did open one. Didn't want to, wasn't feeling it. But, I'm not going to not study Torah for a whole 24-hour period. So, I opened it for 10 minutes. I pulled it up on my I keep saying Palm Pilot. I pull it up on my iPhone and pull up a little Torah and read it. I'm not going to do any depth. I'm not going to discover the meaning of life today, but yeah. So yeah, that's an issue.
Because if you're striving, you never get there. You don't feel good. But you can't paint the target around the arrow type of thing. So it's like that contradiction.
Yeah, sure.
The strive.
I'll tell you, there's something really amazing I'd like to teach you. It's kind of a lesson in spirituality. Is that we often blur material acquisition with acquiring wisdom. Should I say it again? We often blur material acquisition with acquiring wisdom. In material acquisition, if you didn't actually get the thing, you lose. You got the store, it's closed. Or you showed up there, you finally get the thing to the counter, and you remember you forgot your wallet at home. You didn't get the thing. You blew it. Yeah, you failed. That's painful stuff. Anyway, so what I was saying is we blur material acquisition with the acquiring wisdom. If you didn't acquire a physical object that you went out for, which might even be just, I want to be rich. If you didn't get rich, you blew it. And by the way, what happens if you get it? If you get the object, tell me, where should my finger go next? I worked, I tried, I studied, or whatever it is. I got it. Where's the arrow go now? Right down there. And I want to teach you a serious lesson. You ready for this? That term, you learn in economics. I studied little economics summer school. Listen to this. I called my father in LA and I said, Dad, can I go to summer school in San Diego at Black's Beach? And he's like, you've never asked to go to school anywhere. Like, are you kidding? And I'm like, no, I need to take an I was told by the it was part of that graduation package, was they said I never took a class in economics. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. So anyway, I went to economics class in San Diego. No idea what they were saying. But one of the most important, I surfed blacks the whole summer, which was awesome. So that term, you guys know what the term is on the slide down the other side? You know what that term is? It's called the law of diminishing returns. Whenever you get something, it is going to wear off. Like this Bud Light I took a sip of, my first sip, hit the spot like nothing else. Now, It's barely potable. Barely potable. Fresh one might hit the spot, but this one's history. So it's a law of diminishing returns. Once you get what you wanted, it just goes down. I don't care if it's like an awesome, awesome car that was, you worked to become rich and got $100,000 and bought this awesome car. It's not going to feel the same 2 weeks later. And a year later, forget it. Law of diminishing returns. Now,
Is that true with you in surfing right now?
that surfing's got a whole other addictive element, which you probably find in climbing.
That's what I asked.
Yeah, it's got a whole other element to it, and that's a zone you go into, and that zone is a state of being. It's not a state of acquiring; it's a state of being. See, I can acquire something, and now I got this. It's
You
here.
can still get into that zone, whether you're surfing like, I don't know, a 4-foot wave or a 10-foot wave.
It's there for you no matter what. But there is nothing that can compare the zone. Within the zone, there's zones, and there's a 10-foot wave zone. There was a half dome zone for you, when you were climbing half dome. So yeah, there's definitely a appetite for more. But I tell you, every surfer will tell you that when he's out in like even 1 to 3 foot waves, and you ask him how it was, what's he gonna say, Herschel? Yeah, he said it was fun. It was great. It was amazing. Because there's a feeling you have after a session. Maybe it's because it's giant mikvah. You're really in a giant mikvah. And the Pacific's the biggest mikvah on earth. Maybe you're spending all this time in the mikvah. Every time you go under, you're getting another mikvah. You come out of there, you're just like, you're solid.
Herschel's so pure.
Yeah, Herschel's
Must be.
so pure. Anyway, throughout history, and when I was learning economics, so you go up, you climb, you achieve something, and you go down, you find something else to climb. No big deal. Our generation, where you can get everything to your doorstep in one day, especially if you're a member of the Amazon shipping thing, and you can just have it there the next day. Yeah. So what happens? Getting stuff. Does the curve look like this if you want something, or is it more like that? Yeah. It's much more like that if you want something. Okay, I'm not talking about a college degree. A college degree is gonna look like that. But anything else you want, once you're done with college, anything you want, and you have a good job and everything you want is just gonna be like that. What's the problem with that? What's on the other side? That. Yeah? Only it gets steeper. The steeper this is, the steeper that is. Now, I want you to watch something for a second. I usually do it on a whiteboard. I don't know a whiteboard. So it goes like this, okay? You wanted something, okay? You got it. You wanted something. You got it. This is time. You wanted something. You got it. You wanted something. You got it. You wanted something. You're going to start to notice. By the 5th time I went up, you're crossing lines of downs. You're already writing down other things. It gets very hard to fool yourself that what you want is going to do it for you when you're staring at the diminishing returns in your face. And after a while, you stop wanting anything because nothing's worth wanting when you know when you get it, it's already going to come down a steep ride. You already saw the steep ride on your way up, coming down from everything else. And I'll tell you guys, I'm doing this now for 2.5 decades almost. Is what I've been doing. What you guys see me doing right now, besides my seminar company, is 2.5 decades is what I do. I don't care if it's one-on-one, I don't care if it's U10 guy, gal, and I don't care if it's a couple hundred people like I had in New York last week. I've noticed over this 2.5 decades that people's desire has plummeted. They don't know what they want, they don't think they're even gonna find it, and they don't care anymore. And it's very hard to go forward to what you want when you're not sure you even left it behind, because you didn't know then either, and maybe you missed that street. How fast are you gonna drive in one direction if you might have missed the street you're looking for? You're gonna start slowing down. I've been watching desire just like, and you have to know something. Let me tell you something dangerous and scary. Desire is the key to life. You either know what you want, and you have an amazing life, or you don't know what you want, and your life's going to be like a flat line. You got to know what you want. You got to know what's worth having, what's worth wanting. The word for desire in Hebrew is rotzeh. It's from the word for wanting in Hebrew is rotzeh. Try that word, rotzeh. Everyone say rotzeh. Say ani rotzeh. No, Herschel. I want. Ani rotzeh bira. I want beer. I want. Yeah, ani rotzeh. Rotzeh is one of these words from the word ratzon. Is one of the words that only has two-letter root. The two-letter root is, you got it already. Michael's got this one. Two-letter root is resh tzadik, ratz. You know what the word ratz means, Michael? To run. Otherwise known as being motivated. If you know what you want, you'll run for it. If you don't know what you want, you're gonna be crawling. You gotta know what you want. And it's worth aiming that arrow of yours, yeah, for a really long time before you shoot. Society, university world, your parents, the professional world after university, they'll just have you shoot. Shoot. Try this. Don't worry, eventually you'll hit something, we'll pin an arrow around it. Isn't that the way most people date? Aren't most people dating that way? Shooting a lot of little, what do you call it? Little Cupid arrows. You know? That's one ticket to having a heart frozen over for when you finally get married. Good luck feeling any ability to expose yourself fully to your spouse and just totally let your spouse in after, a decade of heartbreak from shooting without aiming. Shooting without aiming is a study of exhaustion and a absolute destruction of ratzon, of desire. And that's why the word in Hebrew for sitting, which is the opposite of running, is yeshiva. Yeshiva. You sit. Some people sit a year, some people sit a half year, some people sit for 3 months. 2 weeks in Israel with the rabbi, that's more just kind of, chilling, traveling, hanging. You'll get some classes for sure. But yeshiva is where you sit and aim. I'd much rather see someone aim for a year and shoot once than shoot for a year and pull out the paintbrush. That's the way it works, man. This is the wisdom of the Torah, and it will bring you only to the highest places. So you have an awesome life, awesome career, awesome marriages, awesome everything, because you shoot only after you aim. You aim, then you shoot. Did I just say you aim after you shoot? I think I did, didn't I? Just get ready to say beautiful. You shoot after you aim.
Beautiful.
Herschel, when you're acquiring spiritual things, Torah is spiritual. I don't care. You get the example of, you ever seen a movie twice and you saw stuff the second time that you didn't see the first time? Okay, and then third time you saw stuff you didn't see the second time, fourth time? Well, I hate to break it to you, but eventually those things are going to run out. No, they're never going to run out. They're never going to run out. Yeah. It will never run out, okay? Torah is like, I'll tell you something interesting. Josh, you might think I know more Torah than you. We're actually about equal. It's all perspective. We're basically equal. Think about it. We're equal. Yeah. Imagine, for example, you were going to race Michael Phelps in a swimming pool 100 yards. Yeah. Who's going to win? Michael Phelps, right? You're going to hit the water. He's already going to be on the other side. Okay. Now I drop the two of you in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Who's going to win?
Michael Phelps.
No. You're both dead. He's going to die later.
Depends
Okay.
where you're going to.
He's going to, no, you got to get back to California. You're both dead. So Torah, you see, we're in the same place in Torah. Yeah, of course, if we opened up a book, that'd be the 100-yard pool. I'm going to win, meaning I'll be probably the one teaching you while we read that book. But when you look at the greater scheme of things, like I know nothing, and you know nothing, we know nothing. And we'll be lucky in our lives. I don't know your appetite. That's back to, I know my appetite, you know. Staring at that burger over there. And the, you know, I love Torah, but I have a son. I have a son who's a musician, you know, Rami. He's a excellent live clarinet player for Hasidic music. He also plays percussion. He's considered one of the #1 people in Israel in a particular Spanish drum called the cajon. You know those acoustic boxes? They're very popular now. So he was considered the #1 player on that when he was 14. Now he's 17. He sits and studies with his head in a book, his rabbis tell me, for 6 hours straight without raising his head from the wisdom. And then he'll come up, you know, go eat something, take a little lunch and whatever, and then he's right back in for another many hours. He can do 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day, 17 hours a day. Huge appetite, thank God. Raising kids these days, you never know what you're gonna get, you know. So this is this is very special, very special. When it comes to spiritual acquisition, you get this? When it comes to spiritual acquisition, you never get it. I'll just say it. I'm just gonna let it out. You ready? This is what you gotta remember to tell them. When it comes to spiritual acquisition, you never get it. You never get it. You're never there. Stretch. You never acquire it. But you're so fulfilled. You see, if your dream is a Tesla, and you don't get it, you're gonna feel really empty. If your dream was big place, 2-car garage, jet skis, and the trophy wife, and you never get it, you're gonna not be feeling so hot. In spirituality, whether it's Torah or God, you'll never get it. You'll be so fulfilled. And I'm going to end with a poem. And it goes like this. When you desire bread, you'll steal. When you desire God, you give. When you desire bread, you'll lie. When you desire God, you tell the truth. When you desire bread, you'll kill. When you desire God, you give life. When you desire bread, you're so empty. When you desire God, you're so full. Nice to hang with you guys. I'm not going anywhere. I just cracked another beer. But now we can just hang.